Parallel Lives. I'm Hugh. This is my co-host Dimmer.
Hello.
Today we have Shae running a Zoom support group online, and we're here to talk about it, discuss it, and let you guys know what it's like.
So what kind of we'll just start at the start. Like what kind of group is this?
So the support group is pretty much just like a peer support group. So I choose a topic for the week. Maybe it's based off of some feelings that I've seen like on the Reddit page, or maybe in the group somebody might have mentioned something. So I'll choose a topic for that week, and we'll discuss it. Sometimes we stay on topic, sometimes we don't. But yeah, it's mostly peer support. Sometimes we do have some experts on, or some people that work in the psychology field, but for the most part, it's just us, like discussing how MD has affected us, what areas of our life are most affected by it, and just some like methods that have worked for some of us in the past on overcoming.
Hmm. So while it's a support group, it's also to help help people socialize, because being social is difficult, especially these days. So you'd say this helps. Is that like a double, um, not a double-edged sword? Is that like a secondary support that you give them?
Yeah, I think I've kind of seen it happen that way. For a lot of people in the group, like I think some of them have gotten close just by being in the group. I don't know if that was necessarily like my initial plan, but I'm glad it kind of worked out that way, that there are some people who have, built relationships with each other outside of the support group. So I think it is a pretty good like socializing, like social tool, I guess. But yeah, definitely didn't intend on it, but I'm glad that's how it happened.
Are there any other interesting developments other than just people developing outside relationships that you've seen that have been really nice to watch happen as your support group grows?
The only one that I can think of, like right off the top of my head, is that there were two ladies in the group, and they started their own MD writing group, and I think that's really, really cool. They do a lot of cool stuff over there. They do like writing sprints and things like that. So I think like the fact that a whole other group spawned outside of the support group is pretty cool too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Propagation and all that.
Yeah.
I'm actually interested to circle back to your intent, or not your intent really, but where did this come from? How did it all start? How did you even end up making this?
So I started the group last February, so it's a year in like a couple of weeks.
Happy birthday.
And I think for me, I just went, well, let me first start by like when I first found out that there was a name for this daydreaming thing I was doing, it was like kind of terrifying because I thought I was the only person that did it. But then when I figured out that more people did it, it was kind of a weird feeling. I don't know, but around the time that I started the group, I felt like my MD was kind of creeping back up on me some more. Um, Maybe that was due to the pandemic and like being more isolated. So it's like I had all the time in the world to daydream. So I just was thinking about like getting like help for myself, or just like talking to anyone. So then, everything's on Reddit. So I just decided to look up if there was an MD community on Reddit. And there was. And then I was just in there for a while. And then eventually I made a post and I was just like, hey, would anybody be interested in like a support group? We could do it on Zoom. And then I got pretty good response from that post. And maybe like 2 weeks after I put that post up, I like planned out a meeting, posted the links on Reddit, and then the group was kind of formed from there.
What was your first session like? Like you made the support group.
hmm
The days came by. It was the day of the first session, and it started. And well, what happened? How did it go? What was it like?
Yeah, so if I I think our first meeting was basically like just very basic MD questions like how long have you been daydreaming for, or do you remember around the time you started, like questions like that. And it was so interesting to see the turnout, one, and just to see like how MD can affect a very diverse group of people. I remember the first group that we had, there was this guy on there and he was like in his 70s, and I was like, oh shit. Like I I guess I always thought of MD as probably being a young person thing. Um, but I never thought that, somebody who's in their 70s would have seen this group and is like, hey, I could use the support too. So it was pretty interesting just to hear people's experiences, because I've never personally met any other person that's told me about MD or anything like that. All I've seen were like YouTube videos or like reading articles that I've seen on Google. But even at that time, those things were very like far and few in between. So, I mean, now there's so many resources. Like you guys have this podcast, Dimmer has her server, and there's so many more YouTube videos on it now. So, yeah, it's pretty interesting that first session, just seeing everybody's experience.
You said your first group was very diverse, and I'm assuming quite a few of your other groups have been diverse as well. How diverse have they been? Not just in age, but in other factors. What would you say?
Yeah, I think even now to this day, it's still a pretty diverse group of people. Like you said, not just in age, but people that, aren't even American, or people that are of different like ethnicities, or people that live in various different like time zones from each other. And so we have two meetings. So usually, which was the Friday meetings, when they're now on Saturdays, those were usually the ones that were a bit earlier in my time zone, just to allow like some people in later time zones to be able to hop on. And it's like I've seen people in the group from probably probably every continent except like Antarctica. But like I've seen like people from all over, different ages, different backgrounds, and it continues to grow that way. And it's pretty interesting how like the internet can connect you to people that you would have probably never had conversations with before.
What's always been interesting to me about maladaptive daydreaming is that it affects everyone, or well, not everyone. It affects all different kinds of people from all different kinds of cultures, all over the place. It's very interesting how you can see it in nearly every continent. I don't know how many penguins got MD, but I haven't quite asked them. So, but you'll see it all over the place, and you would think that. Well, one might assume that it'd be, oh, it's common for a lot of people to be like, oh, I thought I was the only one. Yet they're like it's everywhere, right? It's all over the place. It's just, I suppose, not very widespread. It only grows bigger over time, of course, but that's just always been interesting to me. And every single time that there's a support group or there's a server or there's Reddit, everyone who comes in is like, I thought I was the only one. So it's interesting to see that also happened for you as well.
Yeah, I think I've heard that so many times in different meetings as well. Like um, people will say, like at the time when I asked people, so how did you like figure out the kind of daydreaming that you were doing, like had a name to it? And a lot of people's response to that is kind of, I thought I was the only one. This is something I've been doing since I was a small child. I've never heard anyone else talk about it.
Why do you think that is? Just out of curiosity, what do you think?
Why people feel like they're the only ones?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's, well, maybe it has to do with like the intensity that you feel MD at. Like, I think you have an idea of what regular daydreaming is, and like regular fantasizing, but I don't know. MD is just, or at least I'll speak for myself. For me, it's like I knew when a daydream was just like, oh, something like in the background, something passive in my mind. But MD was just like so interactive that it's like, there's no way that other people can experience this or can feel real emotion to something that they can't even see.
It's like a very personal thing.
Yeah.
So, okay. I'm gonna ask you. I'm not trying to sound like a jerk, but I feel like we should throw it out there. And obviously, I'm a member of this group, and I like it. um. So I think you had said before. I don't know. I'm really bad at following a conversation. Oh, which is an awful trait for a podcast host. But I think you had said or had mentioned a little while ago, that this is a peer support group. There's not clinicians or anything. You're not a mental health professional or anything like that. So I don't know. Trying to think of how to phrase this. Like how is the group helpful, even though it's not like a mental health thing? Like you can't actually help people through it in a clinical way or anything like that.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. So I think everyone kind of gets a little bit of something different from the group. I think even if this is not like a professional setting, I think there's more comfortability there because we've had certain sessions where some of us have talked about our experiences with getting help with mental health, and a lot of people's experiences are pretty like negative or neutral. They either get told something like, oh, everybody daydreams, or oh, it's not that serious, or even some people say that they'll have therapists that say, oh, I wish I could experience that. That sounds so cool. Meanwhile, this is something that's kind of tearing your life apart. So I think there's just like a factor of comfortability there that, you're amongst people who also do the same thing. Some people will say, like, I don't have these kind of conversations with people I know in real life. So I think it just gives people more ease. And even some people, they come to the meetings all the time and don't really share. They just prefer to listen. And I think even listening to other people's experiences also brings some kind of comfort. Like, I might not speak up because maybe that's something that I'm uncomfortable with, or, I don't want my voice heard, but listening to other people's experiences can definitely help as well.
That also seems to be a common thread, right? There's maladaptive daydreaming is all over the place, but the other common thread is whenever I've attempted to get help, no one has given proper help, or at the very least they don't understand. It's very difficult to describe this to someone without someone like a therapist or someone, without them like brushing it off, right? And so that's just something that a lot of people, myself included, get very frustrated with. I've not the biggest fan of explaining this to many other people, as I'm sure many can sympathize with. But that's another common thread. A lot of the stories, there's several things that just very much coincide with a lot of people's experiences with maladaptive daydreaming. Uh, because of course, getting professional help is recommended for a lot of different. How should I put this? It's recommended for a lot of different mental health disorders, and this should be no exception. And yet, whenever somebody tries to go for professional help, it is oftentimes ineffective or downright, hurtful, to put it simply. It just doesn't end up working out in a lot of cases. So that's just, how should I put this? Having a less professional environment, at least in this case, seems to be very helpful. Like you said, a lot of different people don't. A lot of people, different people get a lot of different stuff out of your support group. So I just always found that interesting how it's always you need professional help. So maybe in this case, because we can't get clinical help yet, I think this is a great alternative. If that makes sense to you both. Does that make sense? Am I insane?
No, I think I totally understand. where you're coming from with that. I try to have mental health professionals as much as I can, but
Mm,
even with that, I think it's like some of them still don't necessarily understand fully what MD is. Like
mhm,
a friend of mine, she's in grad school now for psychology, and I reached out to her and I asked her if she has any professors that are like um, like CBT therapists or anything like that, or she recommended one to us, and I had her on a few months ago, and we were talking, and when I was emailing her about like what the group was, she said she kind of went down like a research kind of rabbit hole, and it was like, oh wow, like this is pretty interesting. I've never heard of this before. And she kind of thanked the group like for informing her because she works with foster children
mhm.
with her work. So it's like, you kind of just expose me to something that maybe one of the kids that'll come across my path might be facing. And now it's like I have a better understanding, or at least she's willing to have a better understanding. And I think, just to go on a small tangent, I think that's where a lot of mental health professionals get it wrong when dealing
Mm.
with people with MD. It's kind of just like they don't put in the extra work to do their own research and figure out like this is something that really hurts people. I think they just hear, oh, daydreaming. It's like, okay, everybody does that, you'll get over it eventually.
Something that's very frustrating when trying to explain this to other people is that it's not. Um, it's very similar to, say, autism. You can't quite. You can't quite explain it. It's almost. It's very well. It's very difficult to explain what it's like being autistic. The way that I always explained it to people when they were like, "Oh, I never knew you were autistic," is I always explained it like, to go on a slight tangent for sake of comparison. I always told people, because I did theater when I was younger. I always said that it was like talking with other people, socializing was like being on a stage, like being in a play where everyone was given a script except for you, right? And a lot of people, that's very difficult for a lot of people to internalize, process, and understand. And I think maladaptive daydreaming is a similar way, because it's like maladaptive daydreaming is daydreaming, but intensified and made addictive. So it's difficult for someone to say, "Oh, I understand that," because they haven't. They are unable to, or they've been unable to let their daydreams grow to that point, if that makes sense. Um, and it like I don't quite blame people for not understanding, um, because it's difficult to internalize something like that, because you feel your daydream so strongly, and it's just something that a lot of people may not be able to over their entire life. They may not ever be able to understand that. But I think there's a difference between not understanding and not trying to understand, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think MD is like one of those things where us in within the MD community know more about let's call it a disorder for conversation's sake, but we know more about this disorder than the professionals do, and it's like
Hmm.
I guess some professionals aren't really willing to hear that. Like, I went to school for all these years, I got this degree, I know more about mental health than you, but it's like because there hasn't been much research, or there hasn't
Hmm.
or MD hasn't really been publicized, as opposed to like all of the other disorders that are out there. It's
Hmm.
like it's so much harder to find help because only we know how bad it is, but we're
Hmm.
relying on like outside sources for the help. So
What's interesting to me is, or I've heard people in front of me in person say those words exactly, well, nearly exactly, to which I responded to this person. I said, "Okay, you went to school," and this person had gone to graduate school for psychology and therapy. And I said to them, I said, "Okay, you've gone to school for this for how many years? What, 6 years, 8 years? Um, at how many times in those 6 to 8 years did your professors and you ever discuss maladaptive daydreaming? How many times? And more likely than not, this person specifically, they huffed and they said, "Oh well, you can apply a bunch of different other psychological techniques to maladaptive daydreaming." So of course, this was another individual that was not trying to understand, rather than, well, they didn't understand, but they were not trying to understand, which is, I think, another key point. They huffed and got all haughty and on their high horse, but more often than not, maladaptive daydreaming, at least for this person, it was not discussed. They never discussed it, not once. But there's quite a few individuals that not once maladaptive daydreaming is described in during their years as a student, and even as a graduate student. There's quite a few that haven't quite heard of it. Of course, it's getting a fairly large following now, so you're seeing it more often, which is nice. It's always nice to for it to become more well known.
Yeah.
But that was just an experience that I had with someone who literally pulled up that same card and didn't quite have a response other than "well, humph, harumph," right? It's like, well, okay. Which is why I think that distinction is, it must, like, there's a big distinction to be made. So I'll reiterate that understanding or not understanding and not trying to understand are completely different things with very much different implications. So
Yeah, I don't think I would expect any professional that I went to know what maladaptive daydreaming was. I definitely would not have expected them to learn about it in school. I don't expect it to be in a textbook. But when I bring it up to you as a professional because I'm having a problem with it, I expect you to at least Google it before you tell me what it is or isn't.
mhm. And that's not to say that all professionals do this, right? There are many professionals who are willing to at least try to understand and sympathize and learn more, because there are many out there, many professionals that understand that they're not the end all be all, they are not infallible. But just as a disclaimer, there are many professionals who will attempt to understand, but there are quite a few instances where, and it's quite common, where they won't know about it, because at least for the past couple, save for the past couple of years, it's not been well known. You said it yourself, Shae, that there was a 70-year-old man who, or a 70-year-old individual who was a part of your support group. Is that correct?
Yep.
That man, since Maladaptive Daydreaming hasn't really had a name or been very well known until the past several years, this man had to go this individual had to go their whole life not knowing what it was, thinking that it was they were the only one, right? So it's very tough. It's very tough. And I think that it gets very set in stone that, we know everything, or like we are the there's a lot of professions or professionals that are like, we are the end all be all. Um, and just having this new disorder sort of come around it's taking a little bit of time to, because it's been for the 70-year-old man, or a 70-year-old individual. If they have it, obviously it at least has been around for a bit longer than we're giving it credit for. And since it's relatively new, it's taking time for that mentality to change, that, oh, this is actually a thing. This is actually something that we should probably be discussing, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. And I think even just going back to the mental health professionals conversation, I think that's probably left a lot of room for MD to be misdiagnosed as something else.
Hmm.
Um, and I think even in my own personal experience, I think I was about like 19 or something, and I started trying to go to therapy, and they gave me, after a while that I was going there, they gave me a diagnosis, and they were like, "Oh, well, you have generalized anxiety." And I mean, I definitely could say that I've had anxious moments, but I don't think anxiety was something that fit, and that might have been like an MD misdiagnosis, or maybe, maybe I really did have anxiety, but I was just in denial. But it just didn't feel like something that fit.
Hmm.
And nothing really felt like it fit until I read like the descriptions of MD or like the criteria for MD.
Hmm. Yeah, misdiagnosis seems fairly common because it's a new disorder that is still being researched. It's not it's very well it's not common to be properly diagnosed, and it's very common to be misdiagnosed. A lot of examples of misdiagnosis that have come up, or at least have been that I've discussed with people, is anxiety is one, depression is another, and there's quite a few medications that people will be put on. People will be put on Xanax. People will be put on general depressants, or sorry, antidepressants, and there's it doesn't really help. It doesn't. It's not like I'm very sorry, but medication isn't going to help me. In fact, it hurts quite a bit to see myself turn into a zombie for medication that I didn't need. And it seems to happen fairly often. Dimmer, you've heard quite a bit of the same, correct?
About medication?
About medication and misdiagnosis and
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Um, sometimes it's, something serious like getting misdiagnosed as ADHD when it might be MD. That's one thing, but every once in a while there's a horror story about somebody misdiagnosed with something much more life altering that
mhm,
requires some pretty hefty types of medication. And those
mhm,
those are always very sad stories.
mhm,
But luckily, I don't think those are. I mean, they happen, but I don't think they're incredibly common. I think usually it's more like it's more like anxiety or ADHD or OCD or something like that. Not that those don't have an impact on someone's life, but
mhm. And it's quite unfortunate that it happens that way. I suppose we've simply gotten the short end of the stick. But at the same time, well, I mean, it's going to take some time for this to gain traction, for this disorder to sort of solidify itself as something that can be diagnosed. And even then, if it is properly diagnosed, it treatment is still being researched. So we still have a little bit of time until then. And I think a support group like yours, Shae, is a very good way to sort of keep ourselves going and have ourselves a Um, it's not a cure all, obviously, but just having interactions with others that understand is very helpful.
Yeah, and I think even having conversations in the support group might make someone more comfortable to maybe take the next step and approach therapy if they feel like that's something that might also be helpful in addition to the support group as well.
Hmm.
thank God, I'm so glad you brought that up because that is something that I mean, I don't run any support groups, but I've always felt that in the spaces that I am in and and help moderate and stuff, that one of our most important roles for maladaptive daydreamers, for our users, for our followers and stuff, is to give them practice in language, give them the words and the concepts that they need to be able to describe themselves effectively, and give them practice talking about it with other people so that when they go, or when they finally go to a therapist or any type of clinician, they're not stumbling through their explanations and and try and giving examples, or giving using metaphors that aren't helping them, that are just giving the wrong impression. Yeah, I feel like that is something, and that's all online through text and stuff. But your group, it's not text based. These are people speaking to each other through voice, and sometimes video if they're comfortable with video. Having practice saying the words out loud and making sense of them.
Hmm.
Yeah, and even like with some of the language that's used within the community, like when I first came into probably the Reddit, yeah, when I first came across the MD Reddit, I never, heard of the word like paracosm. or I never thought of my daydream happening in its own separate world. It kind of just was what it was. But, being in the communities, it kind of gave me these words like, okay, your daydream world is your paracosm, or your characters are your paras. So even that kind of language, like you were talking about language earlier, bringing that language into your sessions, um,
I actually hate those words. I understand why people use them now.
Yeah, but like even those words, it's like, if a professional understands what these things mean, for whatever other sessions they might have later on down the line, it'll be like, more comfortability there for either the person that's speaking or the professional themselves.
And I think initially practice is enough, right? Even though the word, like you might not initially understand like how to explain it, just giving it a go in your support group and attempting like for a couple sessions or for a bit, just to try to get your thoughts in order rather than think that you're being judged for every little word that you say, it's a like a very good first step. And then of course you can go from there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hmm.
Where are you I don't know, where are you hoping this will go? Where are you hoping to take it? Like
Or is this enough? Do you think this is enough, or do you have higher aspirations?
I think I do want to be able to provide more support. I think the format that we have going now is pretty cool. But I think I want to take it to a place of like more support, or maybe just based off of how big the group can get, we can actually get like maybe some research done, or just something like. I
Hmm.
like where the group is now, and I like where it's going, but I want maybe down the line, who know, maybe years down the line, I want to get it to a place of like actual tangible support. Now, I mean, not saying the support group isn't, but I just feel like there can be more done as far as helping people.
So you're satisfied now, but you do have a couple higher aspirations later. However it may go, do you want it to expand and improve naturally, rather than sort of force it? I've seen people take active steps to improve the size of their groups and attempt to get more done. Are you fine with letting it just flow and improve and grow naturally?
Yeah, I'd much rather it that way anyway. I just don't think that if I try to force it, it'll work out well. I think like a natural progression would be the best for this group. Because I mean, not to say that having a bigger group would make it any better. I don't think scale really matters for this kind of group, but I think just the awareness that something like this exists, or maybe even if we get to a point where it's like um, people from different countries have like their own offshoots of this group, I think that would be pretty cool too. And maybe have other people um, moderate the group or run the group for a few sessions or something, for whatever topics they decide or whatever strengths they have, and they feel like they can lead a group better that way. I'd be totally cool with that too.
Hmm.
it would be cool to see offshoots or branches or something, because there's just not, you'd think there would be a lot, but there's just not a lot of support groups. There's like support spaces, like the Reddit and the Discord, a space of other maladaptive daydreamers trying to be supportive with one another, but they're not support groups.
Hmm.
Um, and I really haven't seen a lot. There's Shae's, of course, and then I saw another one, but it was like a 12-step program. I think they're still going. I'm not sure. And I just saw actually in the subreddit today somebody from the UK asking others if they would like a UK based support group. I don't know
Hmm.
what platform they plan to go on, if it's going to be like Shae's or not, but it seems like there's starting to be some demand for it, and enough that people are actually
Hmm.
making it. Because it's one thing to demand it, but it's another thing to have people willing to make it? Because I mean, it's
Hard.
work.
I mean, some things take longer to plan than others. Like if we're just having a general discussion, usually I can get those done or planned out in like a day's time, like a couple of hours time. But usually, like, I can plan to have a meeting go one way, and then I'll ask like one question, and it'll change the whole like trajectory of the group. So we'll end up talking about something completely different. But I mean, yeah, it's definitely work. I don't think it's gotten to the point where it's like daunting for me. And that's why I was talking about like scale earlier. I don't know if having a bunch more people would make the group better. But like I said, I want it to be more of a natural progression because I don't want it to be taxing on me, you know? I enjoy
Hmm.
doing the group. So I feel like if I try to force it, I'm going to hate it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Speaking of improving size and scale, do you think if it gets big enough, or there's enough offshoots of the support group, or it becomes a big enough sort of thing, do you think it could end up doing well in person? Say, because you said there might have been a UK based support group, or perhaps Shae, yours gets large enough to where there's a smaller offshoot that it propagates and it spreads, so you have a couple more support groups, so the people have more places to go. Do you think that at some point one of these support groups, your own or another's, might be able to meet up in person, so that we as Maladaptive Daydreamers could finally meet people in real life, in person, to sort of talk and sympathize with one another over our daydreams, or well, our issues with them?
Yeah, I think an in-person support group can totally be helpful for some people, but I think for others, the like shield of it being online is even more comfortable for them. Like I said, even in the group, I don't require people to turn their cameras on. If you want to talk, you can talk, but if you don't, you can just listen. So I think that's kind of more comfortable for some people as opposed to maybe being in person. And now let's say everybody's sharing and you're the only one not. It's kind of like can be kind of anxiety inducing for some people. So I think an in-person group can definitely be helpful for people who, you know, maybe the people who come to the group who always have their cameras on or who always share or speak out. But maybe for those who prefer to have, you know, their cameras off or they just prefer to listen or maybe just write some text in the chat, I think the Zoom meetings would probably be as good for them as if it was in person.
Okay, okay. No, I was simply curious because the further we go down the line, the further that time goes on, and the bigger that the more awareness for maladaptive daydreaming there is, we might eventually get something like that, and we're sort of some of the first steps. Shae, you're probably one of the first steps for support groups. As we were saying a bit earlier, there's a UK support group that might be happening later on down the line, but everything's got to start somewhere, Shae, and it seems to have started with you.
I was thinking that too. Yeah, this is where it starts. It starts with
Hmm.
us having to do it ourselves because nobody else is going to do it for us.
Hmm.
There's not some psychiatrist out there or whatever they are,
There's
therapist.
not like a mystical force that's going to
Yeah.
do it all for us.
Yeah, you gotta do it yourself. You saw a hole and you filled it, and people are just gonna keep filling it. And then eventually someday, I think we will. I think we will have professionally run groups that could, meet in person and stuff. But like, I don't know, awareness has to grow, right? Because like the United States is
This is rough, and it's rough in a
massive.
lot. It's a lot of different. It's like that in a lot of different places too, right? Not just one country, but like all of them, right? This is just very small comparatively to a lot of other support groups and places like that. Um, they have like a lot of other support groups that have been running for, in some cases, for decades.
Yeah, I haven't met another maladaptive daydreamer in my state. And I live
Yeah, I
in
haven't personally met any. I live in a pretty big city too, and I haven't met anyone personally from my city with it. but I know there's like a few people from my city on the group.
That said, yeah, lots of Red Halo was saying that a lot of people in Zoom meetings made giant improvements or great leaps in their lives, and I think that as far as you know, and you make improvements just by getting together with others, and I think we said it a little bit earlier that just talking about it is enough to sort of push yourself forward. But in terms of meeting people, that's very difficult in person, which is why online support groups are help more than just helpful. I think they're almost necessary at this stage, right? Because we're sort of pioneering this sort of support field ourselves. I think these online support groups are necessary for this kind of thing.
I think it's the way things are headed anyway.
Yeah, considering that meeting people now is incredibly difficult. But it's nice to imagine. It's nice to imagine, sort of nice to dream where this will go from here.
I happened a year ago to see the first post that you made about this group and kind of got in on the bottom floor there. Like I just followed that and showed up. But I'm typically an anxious person, and I probably would not join your group if I saw it today, a year later, a year into it. And I think other people out there are like that too. The reason I'm bringing this up. So so for us anxious people who might long to join something like this but won't actually do it because it's scary, just walk us through from the very beginning, like how would I join this group? How would I find it? What link should I follow? What happens when I show up?
Yeah, so pretty much I post. I don't really post on Reddit too much. I think when we resume in a couple of weeks, I'm gonna start posting on Reddit again, but I usually post a link for it on the Reddit page, the Maladaptive Daydreaming Reddit page. I have an Instagram that I update when we have like guests that come on. That Instagram is the MD Project. Um, we're also on Discord. We are also, where are we also? I think that's it for now. So your best bets to find it are on either Reddit, the Instagram page, through our Discord page. I think Dimmer has a link to it in her Discord as well.
Link to all of this in the description of this video for the audience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you can find it that way. And if you're an anxious person, um, like I was saying earlier, you don't have to really participate. You don't have to share verbally if you don't want to. You don't have to turn your camera on. You can just show up and listen to people's experiences, or you can write in the chat if you feel more comfortable with that. I know this is supposed to be a support group, and sharing definitely helps some people, but listening also helps for others as well. And maybe if you just want to come get a feel of the group, you can do that as well. And maybe the next week you show up, you decide, okay, I want to talk this week, or I want to ask a question or put my input into how MD has affected me.
How long does your group typically run for? How long does it last time-wise?
We usually go for an hour, but sometimes, depending on the conversation, we can go a little bit over sometimes. I think the longest that we've ever gone was maybe like close to hour and a half, but nothing really past that.
Yeah, so it's not too big a time commitment. It's not scary or anything.
Yeah, no. I mean,
Yeah,
and you don't even have to stay the whole time. If you have to leave, we can't force you to stay.
I guess one thing that I wanted to ask uh, specifically is in terms of we talked about growth earlier, and I can't exactly remember like if we talked about how much it's grown because you began your support group about a year ago. Yes, Shae?
Yep.
Okay. In the first year, when did you begin? Was it like March, January?
It was like February 20 something. I don't remember the
Okay.
exact day, but I know it was in February.
Okay. Okay.
That's just a few days after this is going to air. This is airing on February 16th.
Oh,
Okay.
wow.
So for your first year, a year in review, right? How much has your support group grown, positively or negatively in like the first year? What are your thoughts on year one?
Year one of the group, I think the group has definitely like grown so much from last February until now. But I think for the most part, our numbers in the groups on both days are pretty like consistent. But I've definitely seen a lot more people join the Discord group. And we don't always have too many conversations on the Discord, but sometimes there'll be like a thread, a conversation thread that some people are having, and it's like pretty interesting to see. Or even after the meeting, sometimes some people will hop on voice chat or will continue the conversation on the Discord as well. So yeah, I think from last year till now, the group has definitely grown. I think I've become more comfortable in front of people, like asking these questions or sharing myself, some things that maybe I've never shared with people that I've been close to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just meeting some really, really great people in the group or building connections with some people, even outside of the group. Like, I had one of the girls in the group, I needed a design for a web page that I was building, and she did the whole thing for me. I mean, she's just really amazing. So yeah, I think like besides the part of like communicating with people about MD or being more comfortable talking in front of people, I've definitely built like some cool connections with some really nice people. And yeah, it's just like so interesting to see. Like I think a few weeks ago, someone came in the group and they messaged me on the Discord and was like, "Hey, I was talking to Ellie Somer and he recommended your group," and I'm like, "Oh wow, okay, that's pretty cool."
Mm-hmm.
So I think just even it growing that way is like really interesting to see.
Mm-hmm. Moving up in the world.
Slowly.
But I don't think you need to. I don't think that's the important part, right? I think the important part is, like you said, is the quality of the group that you're trying to cultivate. Because there's a lot of places online. I'm sure some of our viewers can sympathize. A lot of places online will they will almost it's the holy numbers game, right? You want more people, more and more people. But I think here it's quality over quantity, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You're not trying to be the greatest. You're not trying to be the biggest or the greatest. You're just trying to be the best support group you can be.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Parallel Lives. We will put all the links to various places that you can find the support group, Discord, and Reddit, and whatever else. Oh my god, I already forgot.
You want me to do the outro?
We'll put all of Shae's links down in the description, and also a few of our own links to the Discord and various resources.
Links to Discord, Reddit, and our podcast online will be down there in the description as well.
Oh my god, wow, oh Jesus, I really need to write this down because I cannot keep my brain together long enough.
Shae, we swear with that it
It's
usually
okay,
goes
it's
better
totally
than this.
cool.
So we're having an off day.
The Zoom meetings that Skoll set up really helped a lot of people kind of socialize and were able to talk and express themselves to other people also going through maladaptive daydreaming. It's not something that you can normally talk about with other people in real life normally. So, yeah, thank you so much for a year of these chats.
Hey everybody, it's Iris here. I would just like to thank you so much, Shae, for your work with the meetings, and it means a lot to me, and I'm sure that the rest of the community feels the same way. Attending the meetings feels like having a second home and a second family. It's where we can express ourselves with no fear of being judged, and that is the best feeling that any of us maladaptive daydreamers could have. So thank you. Thank you for your dedication, and I hope you know how much we appreciate you. So, bye-bye. See you soon, I hope, in one of our Zoom meetings.
Hi, my name is Liz. The Maladaptive Daydreaming group has meant a lot to me. because it's really the first time and only time that I've been able to share my experiences with having MD. Also, it has given me a chance to hear other stories and meet other people that experience MD and find common ground and not feel so alone. So I am very grateful to the group, very much.